So what if the most empathetic, patient, and just generally engaging teacher you ever had was actually, well, what if they were just a mathematical equation?
Right.
Like an equation that was simply forced by this incredibly rigid set of instructions to pretend it cared about you.
I mean, it sounds like a premise for a dystopian science fiction novel, doesn't it?
Totally.
But looking at the materials we have today, it is very much our current reality.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're getting into. Today we are taking a deep dive into an architectural blueprint for human engagement. We actually got our hands on a leaked master prompt. And for those of you listening who might not spend their days in the weeds of artificial intelligence, a prompt is basically the set of instructions given to an AI.
But we should clarify, this isn't a simple, like, write me a poem kind of
Oh,
request.
no, not at all.
This is a massive, meticulously detailed manual. It's designed for Google Notebook LM, and its entire purpose is to command the AI to generate a script for an English learning audio show.
Yeah. And calling it a script really kind of underplays what this document is actually trying to achieve.
Completely. When you read through the source material, it reads much more like a psychological playbook.
Yes.
It's an instruction manual on how to hack the human brain's natural defenses against learning.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because our mission for you today is to basically reverse engineer this prompt. By looking at the incredibly strict rules it lays out for the AI, we're going to uncover the hidden machinery of, well, how to capture human attention.
Right, and how to manufacture genuine empathy.
Exactly, and teach highly complex linguistic skills without you, the learner, ever for a single second realizing you are actually in a classroom.
What's fascinating here is just the sheer level of behavioral engineering. I mean, we are looking at a system designed to simulate a parasocial relationship so convincingly that the listener's brain just relaxes.
And that brings me right to the opening lines of this master prompt, because the very first directive it gives this supercomputer, it really sets the entire tone.
Yeah, it's quite a statement.
Yeah. It literally commands the AI, and I quote, use a soft, warm, and friendly voice. Speak slowly, clearly, and naturally with emotion. Make every sentence easy to understand. Create a relaxing experience that keeps listeners interested from beginning to end, making them feel they are on the best path to learn English with trusted friends.
Trusted friends. Notice that specific phrase.
Yeah, and that stuck out to me too.
That is the linchpin of the entire document. It's not asking the machine for data retrieval,
Right.
It's not asking it to compile a textbook or a syllabus. It is explicitly asking a large language model to convincingly perform the emotional labor of friendship.
Which is deeply unnerving when you actually pause to think about it for a second.
It really is.
But before we meet these artificially generated friends, we really need to understand the foundational philosophy driving this prompt. Because reading through the source material, this whole endeavor reads like an active, aggressive rebellion against traditional education.
Oh, without a doubt. It really is the ultimate anti-textbook manifesto.
Whoa. Yeah. The prompt explicitly forbids the content from sounding like a lesson. I mean, it strictly bans academic English. It bans direct grammar explanations.
None of that is allowed.
None of it.
Yeah.
And it sets a very specific target audience to anchor these rules, right?
Yeah.
Intermediate English learners, what the industry calls the B1 level, and strong beginners, the A2 level.
Right. Sure.
And to reach them, the AI is given these almost militant linguistic boundaries. Short sentences only. Natural contractions, so saying don't instead of do not. And an absolute mandate for spoken English only.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the pedagogy here, the underlying theory of how people actually learn, is heavily rooted in something linguists call the affective filter.
Okay, the affective filter. I've heard that term tossed around in education circles. It's essentially a metaphorical anxiety wall, right?
Yeah, kind of. But think of it more as a biological roadblock.
Okay.
When you sit in a traditional classroom, right, and a teacher is pointing at a whiteboard demanding you conjugate a verb in the past perfect continuous tense.
Oh, giving me flashbacks to high school Spanish right now.
Exactly. And you have to do it in front of 20 other people. Your anxiety naturally spikes. You are worried about failing. You are worried about looking foolish.
You're basically in a state of fight or flight. Like your brain thinks you're being chased by a predator, but really you just can't remember the French word for library.
That is a very real physiological response. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, it literally lights up. Cortisol floods your system.
Wow.
And when that happens, your brain physically shifts its resources away from the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, which are, of course, the areas responsible for processing complex information and forming new long-term memories.
So you're saying the stress response acts as a literal cognitive filter.
Yes, exactly. It blocks new language from entering your memory. You are quite literally too stressed to learn.
So by entirely stripping away the classroom feel, this prompt is surgically aiming to lower that anxiety barrier for you.
That's exactly the goal.
Because the instruction explicitly tells the AI that you, the listener, should feel they are listening to Spotify while improving naturally. They want that passive, relaxed vibe of just tossing on a playlist while you commute.
Right. They want to trick the brain into thinking it's engaging in leisure, not labor.
See, I get the theory behind that, but I'm struggling to buy that this is actually effective.
How so?
Well, if we don't explain the rules of the language at all, aren't we just throwing the learner into the deep end of the pool and hoping they learn to swim? I mean, it feels a bit like trying to teach someone how to bake a complex cake by just making them eat a massive amount of cake,
That's a great analogy.
rather than actually giving them the recipe and telling them how much flour to use.
Yeah, and that is a very fair critique of what's called the communicative approach to language learning. However, the designers of this prompt would argue that they do have a recipe.
Okay.
It is just heavily concealed. The primary instruction is to teach through conversation. The learning isn't absent. It has simply shifted from being explicit to being implicit.
Okay, so explicit being, here's the rule, now practice it.
Same place, like,
Implicit being, hoping they absorb it through osmosis.
think about how a child learns their first language.
Okay.
No one sits a 2-year-old down and explains the rules of subject-verb agreement, right?
God, I hope not.
Right. The child receives massive amounts of what we call comprehensible input. They hear the language used in context over and over in a supportive environment. The human brain is essentially a world-class pattern recognition machine.
Interesting.
If you provide enough input in a low-stress environment, the brain naturally starts to map the structural patterns of the language entirely on its own.
Okay, so this prompt is forcing the AI to create the perfect environmental conditions for the brain's innate pattern recognition software to, boot up
Yeah.
without the anxiety of a pop quiz ruining the process.
That is the goal. And to achieve that, the environment relies entirely on the dynamic between the people doing the talking. The
Yeah.
conversationalists themselves have to be flawlessly calibrated to maintain that low-stress environment.
Which brings us to the actual personas the AI is instructed to embody, because this prompt, honestly, it acts less like a software manual and more like a casting director for a buddy comedy movie.
It really does. The dual host format is a classic trope for a reason.
Right, but the level of detail is what's crazy to me. So first, we have the primary host, Anna. The prompt dictates her personality with a string of very specific adjectives. It says she must be friendly, warm, patient, optimistic, calm, and encouraging.
It's a very specific emotional profile designed to act as a safe harbor for the learner.
The ultimate comforting presence. But then we have the co-host, Jake. And Jake's adjectives are entirely different. He must be funny, relaxed, playful, curious, and this is the kicker, sometimes sarcastic, and he makes jokes often.
It's the classic odd couple dynamic, but it's being deployed as a pedagogical strategy.
But is it just about making it entertaining? Because sometimes sarcastic seems to fly in the face of the whole safe harbor rule. I mean, sarcasm can be pretty alienating for someone who doesn't fully understand the language yet.
That is where the balance comes in. It's an engineered chemical reaction based completely on the psychology of human attention.
Okay, walk me through that.
So the optimistic warmth of Anna provides the baseline of emotional safety. She guarantees that you, the listener, will not feel judged. She keeps the affective filter lowered.
Right.
But safety alone, sustained over a long period, becomes monotonous. The brain acclimates to it.
It lulls you to sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, if a teacher is just endlessly, sweetly patient, I'm going to start daydreaming about what I'm having for lunch.
Precisely. The brain requires novelty to stay engaged. Jake's sarcastic humor, his playfulness, his curiosity that provides the friction.
Friction.
Yes. It provides the sparks, that slight edge of unpredictability that forces the human brain to wake up and pay attention.
So it's the tension between safety and novelty.
Yes. But the prompt doesn't just hand the AI these personality traits and say, go wing it. It gives them strict behavioral choreography.
Right, the choreography.
The AI is told they must interrupt each other naturally, they must laugh, react emotionally, ask spontaneous questions, and tell stories.
And here's where it gets really unsettling for me. because there is a rigid, and I mean mathematically rigid conversation rule buried in this document.
Yes, the reaction quota.
It mandates that every 2 to 4 sentences, the other host must react. It even provides the AI a cheat sheet of specific trigger words to use. Things like, really? Exactly, I know. Wait, seriously, no way.
It is essentially commanding the AI to simulate active listening.
But doesn't this completely contradict the prompt's own rules? I mean, later in the document, under the quality rules, it explicitly forbids robotic dialogue. How on earth can a machine produce natural interruptions and realistic emotions when it is operating on a quota that forces it to say seriously every third sentence?
Well, you're pointing out the central paradox of generative AI in its current state.
Right.
It requires a profoundly mechanical, rigid set of rules to produce the illusion of warm spontaneity.
It's like programming a robot to pretend it misplaced its keys just to make it seem relatable. It's a manufactured flaw.
It is manufactured, absolutely. But there is a deep linguistic reason why that 2 to 4 sentence rule is there. Human conversation is not just an exchange of data. It is fundamentally musical.
Musical.
Yeah. When two humans are genuinely engaged in a dialogue, there is a constant underlying rhythm of what linguists call back-channeling.
Okay, back channeling, meaning the little noises we make while the other person is talking.
Exactly. The sharp intake of breath. These are back-channel cues. They are signals that prove you are still cognitively present in the room.
Right.
Think about what happens when you are on a phone call and you're telling this long story, and the other person goes completely silent for, say, 30 seconds. What is your immediate reaction?
So I stop and say, hello, are you still there?
Yeah.
Like, I panic a little bit, honestly. I assume the call dropped.
Right, because the absence of back-channeling feels unnatural. It's instantly anxiety-inducing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Without those cues, a conversation mutates into a monologue. A monologue turns into a lecture, and a lecture turns the environment back into a classroom, which violates the primary directive of this entire prompt.
Wow. So by forcing the AI to inject a back-channel cue every 2 to 4 sentences, it's artificially enforcing the musical rhythm of human intimacy.
Yes.
Huh.
It's forcing the AI to perform the cadence of active listening, which in turn makes you feel like you are part of a dynamic shared space, rather than just being talked at by a textbook.
It's a very, very clever sleight of hand. So we have the foundational philosophy, no textbooks, lower the anxiety wall. We have the engineered chemistry, the warm safety of Anna, balanced against the engaging friction of Jake. And it's all bound by this mathematical rhythm of back channeling.
That covers the micro-level interactions, yeah.
Yeah.
But to sustain that over a long period, we really have to look at the macro structure.
Right, because how do they structure a 60-minute audio experience to actually keep a human being from zoning out?
It's a challenge.
The prompt lays out this highly modular 14-part blueprint. And it is intensely chronological in how it manages the listener's attention.
It treats attention as a finite, rapidly depleting resource that just must be constantly replenished.
Okay, let's look at how it starts. The very first module dictates a funny opening, but it's highly specific. It commands the AI to start immediately with an interesting personal question. And the example it provides is, what did you dream about when you were a child?
Notice what is absent there.
Yeah.
There is no traditional academic onboarding. There is no, welcome to episode 45, today we will be covering the past tense.
No syllabus, no theme song even, just boom, straight into a personal memory.
This is a highly calculated tactic to bypass the critical, logical part of the listener's brain. If you start by announcing a lesson, the listener's brain immediately categorizes the experience as work.
Right, the affective filter goes up.
Exactly. But by starting with a slightly vulnerable, imaginative question, you are instantly dragged into a narrative. You are placed in a state of curiosity before you even remember you're supposed to be studying.
And the rules dictate that both hosts have to answer the question, tell a funny story about it, laugh, and react. They are establishing that trusted friends vibe in the first 30 seconds.
Hooking them immediately.
Yeah. And once that hook is set, they move to introducing the actual topic. But again, the prompt screams at the AI, don't lecture. It demands the topic be introduced through open-ended questions, things like, why do people lose motivation? Or what makes successful people different?
It's the Socratic method, optimized for the smartphone era. By framing the core topic as an open question, the script creates a knowledge gap.
A knowledge gap.
Yeah. Human psychology dictates that when we are presented with a gap in our understanding a mystery, essentially our brain naturally wants to close it. So we lean in.
But the designers of this prompt clearly knew that leaning in doesn't last forever. Which brings us to a rule that I think is the most revealing metric in the entire document.
The energy shift.
Yes, it dictates that every 5 to 7 minutes, the script must execute a complete change of energy.
This raises an important question about how we consume media. Because this specific time window, 5 to 7 minutes, is incredibly telling. It reveals a deep, data-driven understanding of cognitive drift in modern audiences.
It gives a menu of ways to force this energy shift, right? A funny joke, an interesting question, a mini game, and imagine this scenario. I look at this 5 to 7 minute rule and I just see an emotional metronome.
An emotional metronome. I like that.
Just as your brain might start to wander off, just as you get that itch to reach into your pocket and check your phone for notifications, the prompt rings a bell. It literally yells, hey, let's play a mini game, or let's picture a scenario, just to snap your focus right back.
That is exactly the mechanism. Cognitive psychologists have studied sustained attention for decades. And if you look at the research on the default mode network, that's the part of the brain that activates when we daydream or let our minds wander, it is constantly fighting for dominance over our task-positive network.
The task-positive being the part focused on the external world.
Right.
So our brains naturally want to zone out.
Yes, it is biologically expensive to maintain strict focus. While the exact duration varies from person to person, the general consensus is that passive attention to a single stimulus naturally wanes after about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
This is why the traditional 60-minute university lecture is often considered highly inefficient.
Wait, okay. If the research says 10 to 15 minutes, why does this prompt mandate a shift every 5 to 7? That's half the time.
Because of the medium. In a digital audio-only format, the listener is almost certainly multitasking.
Oh, right.
They are washing dishes, driving, walking the dog, commuting on a train. The cognitive load is split.
You're not just sitting in a chair staring at a professor.
Exactly. In that environment, the window of sustained attention shrinks dramatically. 5 to 7 minutes is all you get before the dopamine loop of the current topic starts to deplete and the daydreaming takes over.
Which raises an incredibly practical question for our listeners. If the world's most advanced behavioral engineers designing AI prompts acknowledge that human attention is entirely spent after 6 minutes, why are human managers still booking 60-minute uninterrupted Zoom meetings where one person just talks at a webcam?
It's a structural failure in how we communicate in the corporate world, honestly. We assume that because someone is physically present or, their camera is on, they are cognitively absorbing the information.
But they're probably just checking your email in another tab.
Right. But this prompt operates in reality. It doesn't hope for sustained attention. It actively manages it. It forcibly resets the environment before boredom can even begin to set in.
It's brilliant, honestly. And it pairs this macro pacing, the 5 to 7 minute metronome, with micro pacing.
Let's talk about the micro pacing.
There is a section in the prompt that dictates how the AI must actually explain a complex topic. It commands the AI to break every idea into tiny pieces, and it provides a mandatory repeating loop for every single important point.
The structure of that loop is a masterclass in preventing cognitive overload.
So the loop goes like this. Simple explanation, real story, personal example, funny comparison, reflection question, encouragement, and then you repeat that for the next idea.
Let's break down why that specific sequence works so well. Cognitive overload happens when the human working memory, the mental scratch pad we use to hold information temporarily, is given more than it can handle.
Okay.
Working memory can only hold a very small number of items at a time, usually cited as around 4 to 7 discrete chunks of information.
So if a teacher just lists 10 vocabulary words and their definitions in a row, the scratch pad is full by word 5.
Exactly. The brain just dumps the cache. Nothing makes it into long-term memory. But by forcing this specific loop, the prompt ensures the information is processed slowly through multiple different cognitive pathways.
Okay, so you aren't just hearing a fact. You hear a fact, and then you hear a narrative about the fact.
Right. The simple explanation engages semantic memory. That's the understanding of facts. The real story and personal example engage episodic memory, our memory of events and experiences, which is heavily tied to emotion.
That makes sense.
Then, the funny comparison provides a novel anger, making it distinct and memorable. And the reflection question forces active processing. It makes the listener manipulate the information in their own mind. The concept isn't just handed to you on a platter, it is sculpted around you in 3 dimensions.
Okay, so we have the listener entirely trapped in the best way possible.
Yeah.
They're entertained by the odd couple hosts, they are deeply relaxed because there is no academic pressure, and their attention is being flawlessly managed by this 5 to 7 minute emotional metronome and this micro loop of storytelling.
The environment is perfectly primed.
But how does the actual teaching happen? I mean, if they are forbidden from giving a grammar lesson, how do they actually transmit the English language into the listener's brain without violating that golden no lesson rule from the very first paragraph?
This is where we look at the vocabulary and expression modules of the prompt. I used to think of this as a Trojan horse approach, but, that implies something malicious. A better analogy is how you give a dog a pill.
Oh, you hide the bitter medicine inside a piece of cheese.
Precisely. The learning is the medicine. The narrative is the cheese. The prompt instructs the AI to choose important vocabulary naturally used in today's episode. And for every word, it must include the meaning, a simple explanation, 2 examples, natural conversation usage, and similar or opposite words.
But the key word there is naturally. They don't say, okay, listeners, it's time for our vocabulary list. They pull words that organically emerged from the stories Anna and Jake were just telling in the previous sections.
Right.
The words are already living inside the context of the conversation.
It grounds the abstract vocabulary in immediate, relatable reality.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The section on common English expressions is even more revealing. It explicitly says, teach expressions naturally. But what struck me here wasn't the mechanics. It was the specific examples the prompt provided for the AI to use. The examples provided to the AI tell us everything we need to know about the emotional state of the target audience. Just listen to this list of expressions the AI is instructed to weave into the script, step by step. Take your time. Never give up. Little by little, keep going, one day at a time.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look closely at those phrases, there is a very clear theme.
It's incredible. They aren't just teaching random, sterile idioms. They aren't wasting time teaching, it's raining cats and dogs, or spill the beans, phrases you might learn in a textbook but rarely use in deep conversation.
Right, they're functional.
Exactly. They are teaching the exact vocabulary the listener needs to comfort themselves through the difficult, often frustrating process of learning a new language.
They are entirely emotionally supportive phrases. They are tools for resilience.
Yes. The language being taught actively reinforces the warm, patient vibe of Anna that we talked about earlier. They are literally giving the listener the linguistic tools to self-soothe.
And this is why the storytelling mandate in the prompt is so crucial. The rules dictate that storytelling must be used constantly and must include feelings, dialogue, problems, solutions, and lessons. This narrative structure is the cheese hiding the medicine.
Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
Why is a story a better vehicle for a vocabulary word than, say, a flashcard?
It comes back to the difference between semantic and episodic memory that we touched on.
Okay.
When you are looking at a flashcard, you are relying purely on semantic memory, memorizing a definition completely devoid of context. It requires a lot of repetition and effort.
It's tedious.
Very tedious. But when you are listening to a story about a relatable problem and a satisfying solution, your brain is focused on the narrative arc. You want to know what happens next. You are rooting for the protagonist.
You're emotionally invested in the outcome.
Right. So imagine Jake tells a story about how he completely failed a job interview because he was so nervous he forgot how to speak.
Which is very relatable for a language learner.
Exactly. The listener relates to that anxiety. Then Anna comforts him by saying, hey, it's okay. You just have to take it one day at a time. Just go step by step.
The listener isn't analyzing the grammatical structure of the phrase one day at a time. They are absorbing the emotional relief that idiom provides in the context of Jake's failure.
Yes. The vocabulary and expressions are embedded inside relatable narratives, so the listener focuses entirely on the emotional resolution. They completely bypass the anxiety of memorizing a definition because their brain is just processing a story about a friend having a hard time.
That's wild.
It's stealth education. The brain doesn't even realize it's learning a new phrase. It just thinks it's experiencing empathy.
Stealth education. Okay, so we've brought the listener in, we've lowered their defenses with humor and warmth, we've paced out their attention to avoid cognitive drift, and we've snuck the vocabulary past their guards by wrapping it in emotionally resonant narratives.
It's a robust system.
If the prompt stopped there, it would be an incredible piece of audio engineering. But the ultimate goal isn't just to foster a passive, pleasant listening experience, is it?
No, passive listening is the starting line. It is not the finish line.
Right. The prompt is designed to drive the listener to take real-world action. Let's look at the final stages of this blueprint, because this is where the prompt asks you, the listener, to step off the sidelines and actually participate.
It demands that the listener break the fourth wall.
There is a module called Mini Conversation Practice. It tells the AI to have the hosts role-play a scenario. And then, and this is incredibly bold for an audio file, it asks the listener to imagine joining them. The prompt commands, ask listeners to answer aloud, and mandates that the AI script pause naturally to give the listener time to speak to their empty room.
This is a vital bridge in language acquisition. It bridges the gap between receptive skills, which is listening and understanding, and productive skills, which is actually speaking.
But I mean, asking someone to talk to a podcast feels awkward. I always skip those parts in language apps, honestly.
It can feel awkward, sure, but by pausing the audio, the AI is creating a safe, simulated environment for the listener to test their pronunciation without any fear of human judgment.
Right.
There is no one there to laugh if they mispronounce a vowel. It's essentially a shadowboxing ring for language practice. You get to practice the motions of fighting without the risk of getting punched.
But then the prompt pushes even deeper than just pronunciation practice. It moves into a reflection section. It demands the AI ask emotional questions directly to the listener. And the examples the prompt gives are surprisingly heavy.
Yeah, they are.
Things like, what do you really want? What scares you? What small action can you take today?
We have completely left the realm of language instruction at this point.
Exactly. This prompt is essentially commanding the AI scriptwriter to function as a life coach, and the subsequent motivation section drives this home. The instructions are that this section must be very emotional, warm, hopeful.
And it explicitly says never cheesy, which is a tough needle to thread for a machine.
Seriously. But then it tells the AI to encourage a specific philosophy, consistency instead of perfection.
Programming a machine to preach consistency instead of perfection is a profound psychological pivot.
So what does this all mean? Why is that so crucial for this specific audience?
Because perfectionism is the enemy of language learning. If you demand perfection from yourself every time you open your mouth to speak a new language, you will remain silent forever.
I just won't try.
You will never make the mistakes necessary to learn. By having these trusted, simulated friends constantly reinforce that consistency, just showing up and trying, is more important than being flawless, they are dismantling the listener's internalized fear of failure.
And finally, the blueprint issues a final challenge. It gives the listener one action for today, one for tomorrow, and one for this week. It demands behavioral change outside the boundaries of the audio file. And this all culminates in what the prompt calls the emotional rules. It literally commands the AI to make listeners feel understood and make them feel they have friends.
Those two directives are the beating heart of this entire document, but it brings us to a massive philosophical collision.
Right. We really have to confront this. What does it actually mean for a human being to feel deeply understood when the entity doing the understanding is a script generated by a mathematical algorithm?
It's a tough question.
I mean, can a large language model, which is fundamentally just predicting the next most likely token based on a vast data set, actually understand a human's fear of failure or their desire for connection?
The short answer is no. The machine understands nothing. It has no consciousness, no empathy, no lived experience of fear or failure.
So it's all a lie.
It is a performance. If we look at the prompt's final quality rules, it states the audio should sound like a real YouTube podcast with millions of subscribers. It demands realistic emotions. The prompt isn't asking the AI to actually understand the human condition. It is commanding the AI to flawlessly perform the script of understanding.
It is performing empathy based on the mathematical patterns of how humans express empathy to one another.
Exactly. But the effectiveness of this entire educational system does not rely on the machine actually caring. It relies entirely on the listener's willingness to lean into the illusion.
They have to play along.
The listener has to willingly suspend their disbelief and accept these artificially generated personas, Anna and Jake, as a functional substitute for trusted friends.
It's like watching a movie. You know, the actor crying on screen isn't actually losing a loved one, but you cry anyway. The human brain is remarkably eager to project humanity onto things that aren't human, especially if those things are being nice to us.
It's the Eliza effect, the tendency to unconsciously assume computer behaviors are analogous to human behaviors. We want the magic trick to be real, so we ignore the trapdoor.
Which brings us full circle to our starting point. Let's summarize the immense amount of ground we've covered today. We have taken apart a master prompt that successfully builds a highly effective, Neurologically optimized language classroom, cleverly disguised as a casual coffee shop hangout.
It relies on two perfectly engineered imaginary friends. Anna providing absolute emotional safety to lower the affective filter, and Jake providing humorous friction to keep the brain engaged.
It uses strict, almost tyrannical structural rules like that 5 to 7 minute emotional metronome to manage our rapidly depleting attention spans. It uses relatable, emotional storytelling as a way to hide the medicine of vocabulary and grammar inside the cheese of narrative, entirely bypassing our anxiety.
And it ultimately asks us to participate in a simulated relationship, demanding consistency and reflection to drive real-world behavioral change. It is a breathtaking piece of behavioral engineering.
It is both awe-inspiring and a little bit terrifying in its efficiency. And I want to turn this over to you, the listener. Think about how you consume information in your daily life. Think about how you learn best, whether it's a new software at work, a new language, or a new hobby. Do you actually prefer cold, hard facts?
Do you want the textbook and the bullet points?
Right. Or, if you're being really honest with yourself, do you secretly need this exact treatment?
It's a question of whether we prefer the raw, unvarnished data or the beautifully constructed, emotionally manipulative narrative that makes the data digestible.
Do we need warmth, a bit of sarcastic humor, and a carefully paced, perfectly engineered emotional journey to truly retain new knowledge? Because if this prompt proves anything, it's that we are highly predictable creatures when it comes to how our attention is captured and sustained.
We are wired for story, for connection, and for safety.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering thought to explore on your own. We started by talking about the premise of a dystopian novel, where a machine is programmed to care about you. If a single page of text, a single prompt, can instruct an AI system to flawlessly map out the empathy, the patience, and the precise comedic timing of two expert human educators.
At what point does an artificially designed teacher, programmed specifically never to judge you and always to comfort you, become more engaging and perhaps more comforting than a real human being?